What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Team Chat Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Jarrett Wilson, joined to my right by Rachel Mogan.
Buongiorno.
Buongiorno to you as well. How are you this fine?
I'm sleepy.
You sleepy? I was too today,
I'm
actually.
sleepy.
I was like really fighting the sleep hardcore all day long.
Well,
I don't know why.
And I didn't get to go for a walk today. A, I didn't have time, but also B, it's so humid outside.
God, I did go for a walk today, and it was the worst decision.
It's the humid where, like, you can see it in the
yeah.
air.
I told the sun came out earlier, and I said to Sam, look, you can see how hazy it is.
See all the
sucks.
moisture.
It is terrible.
Boy.
It's bad. And this is only what? We are in May at least, so I guess that feels
I mean, it's been raining a
more
lot
like summer.
recently,
Yeah,
so that
but
kind of
still,
makes sense, but still,
it is a
blows.
swamp out there. And
No.
I did go on a walk. I took Birdie on a nice long walk and everything around the hood.
And then they got bats.
Bat.
The dogs.
Oh, the dogs got bats.
Yes,
I thought you
the
said bats. And I was like,
No.
what? The bats? No bats. They did get bats, which was also a very humid activity.
I'm sure.
Also in the backyard. So yeah, it's been enough time out there today. I don't need to go back out. So it's a perfect reason then to stay inside and play video games, which is what we're here to talk to you about today. The ones we love, the ones we hate, and everything in between. And you can listen to new episodes whenever they come out on Thursdays on podcast services around the World Wide Web whenever they come out. They come out on Thursday mornings when they come out.
Most of the time,
Most
not
of
today.
the time. Not this week, actually. We are having
We're
to
one
push
day
this
late,
sort of
sorry.
1 day late. Sorry about that. But they generally try to release on Thursday mornings, and you can listen to those on podcast services around the World Wide Web, such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and other places. You can also watch a video version of each episode over on our YouTube channel. Links for all that are in the description below. Follow us on social media at Threads, Facebook, Instagram. Join our Discord server. We have a lot of great conversation when we're not here talking about games. And then finally, if you would like to support the show and make it bigger and better, just like I meant to do that too. Super Saiyan Ace, Erica L, Elise F, Zach S, Susan M, James K, Michael B, Andrew M, Michael S, and Brandon W, aka the Annular Throbbler. Annular Throbber.
The annular throbber.
Annular
We're
throbber.
really not sure how to pronounce it, but
I
God,
thought
it's
annular,
awful.
but like
I say annular in my head.
Annular Throbber.
The annular throbber.
And you get onto me for tidbits.
Because it's horrible.
We've been dealing with that in the Discord for the last week. No, but it's the name change has been hilarious. So keep it up. It's good stuff. But if you want to be like those cool folks, they headed over to patreon.com/teamchatpodcast, where it's for as little as $1 a month. They're supporting the show, and in return, we're giving cool perks like getting the episodes early before their general Thursday release. Even on weeks where we don't release on Thursdays, you still get the episode early. And then you also get a private channel on our Discord, the Rogues Gallery, and a lot of extra stuff along the way.
And we'll probably give you like fun new nicknames in the
That's
Discord,
true, like
Annular
Throbber.
Throbber.
So check all that out if you want. If you can't do that, that's no big deal at all. We totally understand. There are a lot of great ways that you can support the show for free, such as telling your friends, writing us reviews, or subscribing wherever you're listening to or watching the show. You can even subscribe over on Twitch because we do streams and stuff like that, so you can subscribe to us there. So check out all those different places. And we appreciate and love each and every single one of our viewers, listeners, patrons alike.
Heart emoji.
Heart emojis.
By the way, you can safely search the term annular throbber. We promise it's not a sex thing, even though it sounds like it is.
like a sex thing.
So now you have fun homework to go figure out what it actually means.
I've been too scared to, so I'll do it
Brandon
now.
explained what it was, and then I just thought it was hilarious, so I was like, this shall be your new name.
Oh, he didn't even change it.
No,
you
I
changed
it. I was like,
So
wait,
there
I
you
can
go.
do that,
Yeah,
can't I?
you can get the chance for your own personal nickname
Yeah.
on the Discord. So hey, isn't that worth at least $1 a month? I think so.
Probably.
So anyway, enough about all that. Enough about annular throbbers. We do have a very fun, exciting review coming up for you today on this episode. But before we do that, we do have to get into the moment with Mogan, find out what's coming out soon, and we actually do have a bit of news to talk about. So
unfortunately, none of it really good. Well,
Yeah.
some of it kind of good. Some of it was
resolved
bad,
well.
and then it came out okay.
Yeah.
But we're not going to hit everything that's coming out this month. We're just going to hit the highlights for people that are interested in both Donkey on YouTube and indie games. So Donkey's game studio that he created maybe a couple of years ago by now is coming out with its first game, Animal Well. I believe it's been featured on a few of the various gaming showcases over the years leading up to its release. It looks like a pretty challenging challenging and also very lovingly made 2D side-scrolling action game. So if that sounds interesting to you, Animal Well is coming out on PlayStation 5, Switch, and PC on May 9th. So what's today?
Today is the 8th, I think. Yeah,
Oh,
today's
God,
the
okay,
8th. So
tomorrow,
tomorrow,
bitch.
or by the time that you're listening to this, it's out.
Yeah. Other stuff that's coming out towards the middle/end of this month, for the people that missed it the first go around, Ghost of Tsushima Director's Cut is finally
nice.
coming to PC on May 16th. And then more importantly, another weird indie game that I can't wait for, Lorelei and the Laser Eyes, is coming out on the 16th as well for Switch and PC.
Follow up to
It
Gilmore
looks-
Girls that no one expected.
Yeah, that's what I think of every time. It looks bonkers. I cannot remember right now which studio this is from, but it's one of the ones that's made other indie games that I really liked.
I got you. Let me
Yeah,
see.
look up who did Lorelei and the Laser Eyes. I know I'm going to remember it. It feels like one of those Annapurna games, maybe?
Yeah, probably.
May have been Annapurna or one of the other really common indie ones.
Oh, you're right. Developed by Simogo,
Simogo!
published by Annapurna.
So Simogo, they made game on mobile/Switch that I really, really liked. Year Walk. There we go. Year Walk.
And Sayonara Wild Hearts.
Oh yeah, they did do Sayonara Wild Hearts. So Sayonara, from the team behind Sayonara Wild Hearts and Year Walk, which two very, very different games, comes this new weird like puzzle mystery game, Lorelei and the Laser Eyes, again for Switch and PC on May 16th.
Nice.
And there's a couple of other things coming out here and there, but none of it we really care about right now, so we will call it there and just move on to what's going on in the world. What's happening?
So a lot of big things actually happened in the couple weeks that we were away from an episode, and it's like what I thought was going to be the big one,
And then it wound up not being the
it
big
kind of like
news.
wound up semi-resolving, was the Helldivers 2 controversy, which at this point everybody is probably aware of. If you're not, the whole thing is at Helldivers 2 launch, it was always supposed to be a thing that you had to link your PlayStation profile with your Steam account if you were playing on PC. But due to server issues and everything at launch, they said, don't have to do it right now. Might bring this back in the future, whatever, but we're not going to require this. But didn't really make it a big note that it was going to come back kind of thing. And then all of a sudden, like a week ago, Sony decided it's time. Let's do this. And the
With no notice, by the way.
No,
they just sort of launched it on people.
I want to say it was going to be the 30th. I think was going to be the final day that like it actually like really kicked in.
Also, I shouldn't
But
say with
still-
no notice. I can't really confirm that. We just didn't hear
but
about
no,
it.
still, it was very sudden. Like, hey, we're going to be doing this. It's going to be happening soon, and you got to get on board to do it. And normally, you would think, okay, I just would make a PSN, whatever, and go ahead and do it. I bought the game on PlayStation, so that doesn't really affect me in this case. But it did have the blowback effect of countries that PlayStation Network is not in could not do this unless they did it through VPNs and other means, which can then have an effect on their Steam accounts. This was all explained to us in our Discord actually by Nines,
Who's in Panama?
who is in Panama. And so like they were feeling the effects of this and not going to be able to play Helldivers or potentially get their Steam account banned if they tried to go through a VPN to do this stuff. So obviously that then results in a lot of people who have been playing a game, who bought a game, just suddenly being able to be like, you cannot play this game anymore.
can't play that game anymore.
And there was no like really recourse for making it better. Like, and the thing that it did make it seem worse is that the developers themselves, Arrowhead, were the ones getting a lot of the like brunt from this.
Even though it wasn't their fault.
It wasn't their fault. It was a thing. Their CEO actually, I would say, and people who work for their community managers were actually very vocal, I thought, in like letting people know, like, hey, we're like our hands are tied, and this is not how we would want this to be.
This is a Sony thing. Yeah,
Exactly.
this is a Sony problem, and it's affecting us, unfortunately.
Yeah, and so as a result, massive review bombs took place of the game. The game like dropped to mostly negative reviews so quickly, and within the day, Sony reversed their decision and walked back, even though they said they originally were acting like they weren't going to. And so it was a really cool thing that like they were able to do this and reverse it. There is still the thing that the game is still restricted though in a lot of countries. So it's like the PSN network requirement, sure, walked back and is fine and is no longer going to be a thing. But there are still countries that it's running into, the game is restricted to not being able to play. So those need to be unlocked now too, so that everybody can get back into the fight and spread more managed democracy. And so, the craziest thing about this is, and this is what I pointed out in the Discord too, is that this is a game where you literally are supposed to follow blindly your oppressive fascist government and not question anything that's ever told to you to do or anything like that. And this is the game where players take a stand,
mobilize as a community.
Yeah, to then be like, no,
We're not going to do
that. So it's a pretty interesting thing to get to see. But yeah, so
it's just so dumb because you can clearly it's not like the game needs to have the requirement of linking your PlayStation Plus profile to Steam. That is not a necessary thing. It's an unnecessary roadblock that they clearly demonstrated. Hey, the game can function without this.
Yeah,
we're just going to do it anyways.
Well, and it's one of those things, especially the fact that they it takes the game away from players who bought it.
Who already bought it.
That sets a dangerous precedent in and of itself.
I think Steam was offering full refunds.
Okay, well, that's good.
Yeah.
But still, that sucks. You bought and paid for something, and then they're just decided because of a policy change. And it's the kind of thing of you can't say we're not going to have this and then force it, and then it have such detrimental effects that just doesn't do good. The thing is about it too that is absolutely baffling is how. Maybe they didn't anticipate the blowback, but they surely had to some extent. But Helldivers 2 has had a stellar record. Granted, yes, it had the server issues at launch, but that was because they didn't expect it to be as big as it was. That's kind of a forgivable whoopsie. And then there hasn't really been any other issues with the game. Sure, people will complain about certain buffs, nerfs, whatever,
people
issues
do that
from
all
patches.
The time. Who cares?
But the overall reaction to this game and the amount that the gaming world as a whole has joined around this title, and they thought this is the thing, we're going to just throw this little let's stir the pot.
So you play Helldivers, I do not. I'm curious to know, while you were playing the game leading up to this change, I think you said that it was May 30th, April 30th?
May 30th.
May 30th.
They announced it a week ago, so maybe in the end of April when they actually said it.
In-game, when you purchased the game, when you went to log in for the first time, were there any checks and balances in place to tell you, hey, it's not happening right now, but at some point you're going to have to link your PS Plus PS Plus profile to Steam to be able to keep playing? This was specifically for PC. Yes.
I did not see that. We will have to ask Snoot Boots.
Yeah, so that's my question, is because I think a lot of these kinds of issues could be better handled and contained depending on how good the communication is before and after.
Right.
Because if you're going to Steam and you're purchasing a game to play it on PC, but there's a pop-up that says, hey, just an FYI, it's not happening right now, but on blank date, you're going to have to link your PS Plus profile to this account to be able to play this game. That's a little bit different because that's clearly giving people fair notice.
Right.
But I wonder if that ever happened.
I did see people saying that it is in the terms, it was in the terms in the
They hide so much
EULA.
bullshit
Exactly.
in the
But
terms.
that stuff, who reads it?
Yeah, I mean a really easy to see.
Yeah, an actual pop-up. No, I get what you're saying. And
because if it's going to affect your ability to literally play the game that you paid money for, that's the kind of thing that should be very easy for gamers to be made aware of.
Yeah.
You shouldn't have to look for it.
No.
It should be part of the purchasing process if that's going to be something that happens to the game later down the line.
100%.
So just shady tactics all around.
And the thing is, too, you were kind of saying, the game does not require the PlayStation Network.
No.
The only reason for needing that hookup is so that way, PlayStation there are going to be people who don't have a PSN profile, and they're going to get it. So they're going to see a big influx in users, which looks good for stock stuff and like that. And then, of course, all precious data. But it's just, but it's just you people love the game. Why try to throw this wrench into it now? And so it was such a weird move. But, like we said, it's quasi-resolved in that it's not going to be a requirement anymore, but hopefully that the countries where it was restricted in play will be able to get back access to it.
Fingers crossed. We're praying for you.
We are, and I don't pray.
Peace and blessings be upon you.
But then, so we thought that was going to be a big story to talk about this week.
And then a bigger one dropped.
A bigger one dropped.
That does not have a silver lining.
It does not. And it has a very terrible lining and news for a lot of people that I don't know if it's known yet the full extent of how many people this will affect. But Microsoft, what is this? This was Monday, I believe.
Yeah, this was days ago.
Announced that they're going to be shutting down 4 studios, which are Arcane Austin, Tango Gameworks, and Alpha Dog Games and Roundhouse Games. So, the two of those studios that I knew and stood out were Arcane Austin and Tango Gameworks. Tango Gameworks did Hi-Fi Rush that just came out.
They also did the Evil Within series.
And the Evil Within series, yeah. Arcane Austin did the more recent Redfall, which everyone knows
had a lot of
did not do well. It did not have a good launch, did not have good support, and they're even having to, now that the studio has been closed, they're having to do what's called make good promises, I guess, or restitutions to people who did buy like the unreleased DLC that will now never be released. So
because they're stopping all support for Redfall.
All support.
If that weren't obvious.
Because I want to say that like it's just. Well, if you were around, you saw the news stories about it. It just did not launch well. It had server issues out the ass, and then just couldn't never recover from it. And I think was just a boring game to play, unfortunately. And so it just, which granted, that's hard, and that is hard, especially in today's ecosphere of games and development, to bounce back from that. But you're also just like, Bethesda just got bought by Microsoft.
Yeah,
and
because these were all
closing.
studios that were related to Bethesda.
Yeah.
So these were all cuts to Bethesda, which is like, hey, this is maybe the reason that the monopolization of video games under 1 to 2 companies is a bad thing.
Yeah.
I know that that's obvious, but some people think like, oh, it's not going to be that big a deal. And then like, oh, actually, it kind of is.
Yeah. And I mean, I understand the point of like when developers do, get bought by a publisher and everything, and that is a big step and everything, but you do lose a little bit of that autonomy, I guess. And so unfortunately, it does look like these ones are going to have been shuttered and will be some of their stuff being rolled into other studios like the... like ZeniMax and everything, or we'll take over some of the games and everything like that. But and then anything Arcane Austin will be moved to other Arcane studios and stuff like that, because there's like Arcane Leon, which is making the Blade game, and they just did Deathloop and stuff like that.
I did see on our because Arcane Austin, obviously that's a local video game company for us. I did see on one of our local news sources that at least 100 people are being just fully laid off, so they're not being moved around.
Yeah.
So damn. Dude.
Yeah. And it just sucks because this is a continuation of, the mass layoffs that we've already seen this year and over the last year. And so it's just kind of like, when is it going to stop? Like, when is the bleeding going to end?
It's not going to end until companies feel like they've made enough money to say to shareholders, look at how much infinite profit we have, which means it's never going to, that's not something that's going to end.
Yeah, probably not. So it sucks. It's unfortunate. And, we wish the best for everyone affected, and hopefully they can land back on their feet soon enough. But yeah, it's kind of weird. And the Hi-Fi Rush one, Tango Gameworks, that doesn't make sense.
Sucks.
Because, like,
Hi-Fi Rush was a darling of the year.
I haven't played it yet, but like on my list, but like still to do a game like a shadow release game like they did with Hi-Fi Rush, it'd be met with such huge acclaim. We've had several people on our Discord talk about how much fun it is, and it's just kind of like, wow, we're weird. All right, cool. It doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, like interesting choice there.
Yeah, very interesting choice. But like I said, hopefully everyone will be able to jump back on their feet, and hopefully, maybe eventually, people will decide to quit laying off everyone in the world. So, it'd be great. So
maybe we'll see.
Maybe we'll see. But it's time to move on to our main topic of the day,
which is a game that truly no one saw coming.
So Mogan has a fun review for us today. What is this game?
Yes, I am here with a full review with some spoilers towards the end, but that's because it's for a game based on a novel from like the 1930s or 20s. We're talking about Agatha Christie's Murder on the Orient Express in video game form. So to be clear, this I know that we featured it on an episode maybe weeks ago now, but this was a gift from Kirok. So Kirok, thank you so much for the games. He sent me Murder on the Orient Express because obviously everybody knows, big fan of mystery point-and-click games. Nancy Drew Die Hard over here.
Of course.
So it made perfect sense. And you got Bramble.
Bramble, yes.
So I'm still really interested in Bramble, but we're not here to talk about.
We haven't got to Bramble yet.
We're not here to talk about Bramble yet. We're going to get to it, but not right now. Instead, we're going to be talking about Murder on the Orient Express.
Mystery.
So last time I brought this up, you said that you had actually never seen any of the movies.
I haven't seen it,
and you've never read the novel itself.
No, I have seen Poirot mystery. Like I have seen Hercule Poirot BBC shorts or whatever. Not shorts, not like the show. It used
Like
to be
miniseries.
Yeah, wasn't
or
it
like a
miniseries?
series
It was
or a
like
miniseries.
who was it? David Suchet.
I mean, they make 1,000 of them.
Yeah.
So the Poirot.
So I've seen some. I'm familiar, but have yet not seen probably the most famous of her work.
Yeah, I think Murder on the Orient Express probably is her most famous, followed very closely by, I think, Death on the Nile.
Yeah.
And then there was another really famous
Haunting
one
in Venice?
that I'm not sure if many fans of hers would consider that one.
I guess
a
that's
big,
the most.
I used to
recently
read a
made into
lot of
book,
Agatha
or movie,
Christie,
I mean.
and I maybe like 12 something. I want to say that there. Anyways, that's neither here nor there. The point is that if you're unfamiliar with Agatha Christie, and more importantly, the protagonist of this game and of the book series, Hercule Poirot, it is basically Agatha Christie's Sherlock Holmes. So you can kind of take that same idea of like a genius investigator that doesn't necessarily they're not really like on the case, but also they're solving the case. It's one of those cases of like, well, Poirot is retired in a lot of stories that he's in, but like also he's gonna solve the mystery regardless. Or he just sort of happens to be somewhere and a murder happens and he's like, aha, don't worry, Poirot is on the case. So it's sort of that type of deal. And one of the important things you need to know about Poirot is he has a fabulous mustache.
Absolutely.
It was on the cover art for this game, which is fantastic. And then one of the primary, actually the only collectible in-game are golden mustaches.
Oh my God, that's incredible.
Are just sort of sprinkled around. There's like a set amount in every sort of, I guess you would say like checkpoint or scene in the game. And you have to find all of them to get obviously the trophy for the trophies. But I did not do that. I didn't have time to find all the mustaches. I just thought it was hilarious that the trophy were just little golden mustaches.
That is funny. That's
and every
very funny.
time Poirot finds one and like picks it up, he's like, oh, hello, my perfectly curated friend. He's so funny.
It'd be funny if he like could attach them to his actual mustache, It's almost like a grill. But
That
for
would
his
be
mustache.
incredible. This is just a little tirade on mustaches. When you're going through Poirot's cabin on the Orient Express itself, there's just like a tiny vanity section for your toiletries and stuff. And you can look at every single one of his toiletry items. They're all related to mustache upkeep.
Incredible.
There's like a fancy
Incredible.
mustache comb. There's fancy mustache wax. There's fancy mustache conditioner. There's fancy little like trimmers for the mustache. And he has like commentary about all of them related to mustache upkeep.
I mean, it's
and
an important
like,
job.
This is hilarious. So they really committed to the idea of Poirot as a very eccentric character in a lot of ways, which is very true. So that's the TLDR on Poirot if you're not familiar with him. But because of the time when they were written, again, we're talking like early 1900s, early to mid 1900s, when Agatha Christie was writing these, they're very much period pieces by today's standards. So whenever you're watching like the movies or any of the media that are made from Poirot, most of them still try to place themselves in that time period. So the game, however, Murder on the Orient Express, makes a very interesting decision to not do that.
Oh.
So even though the cover didn't really make it very clear, and the train itself is technically like the anniversary Orient Express, so it's a classic train in the context of the game, but it's 2019, and every Poirot has a cell phone, and like, it's so weird.
Okay. So
It's
it took a little
so
bit took some
weird.
liberties.
So the very first thing that happens is you are in a hotel in Istanbul, which is where the Orient Express departs from to start on its journey to Paris, I believe. So you're in a hotel in Istanbul, and you and a bunch of other people that are going to be on the Orient Express are all staying there. And sort of the tutorial is one of the other passengers on the train loses his ticket, and Poirot has to step in and be like, I will use my investigative powers to find your ticket, and then we will all get onto the Orient Express and go on our way. So it's really interesting just kind of right off the bat to see how the game will mechanically work. And I have to say, for the most part, it's a mixed bag.
Oh, interesting.
It's not really... It's neither really bad nor good, but I guess we will start with some of the mechanical cons, because I think at least a good portion of what's not very great about the game has to do with the mechanics of it. So first of all, the art style isn't bad. It is very stylized. You know, the character models aren't meant to look like realistic humans. But some of those character models are truly heinous.
Oh.
Like, they're
Okay, I gotta
so
see this.
ugly. And they get really into, like, the uncanny valley territory.
Ooh.
So specifically look up Murder on the Orient Express, Sonia Armstrong, and make sure it's for the game. So Sonia Armstrong video game.
Video game.
Because otherwise you're going to get all the various
Right.
people that have ever played her. No, that's not her,
Not
but that's
her?
pretty close. I mean, that's at least an idea of sort of what... I mean, that's not the worst. That's not the worst one. So for context, Jared is looking at a still
put it in the
image
video.
of Countess Andreni. So she's actually one of the better looking models. I'm going to go ahead and tell you now. Wow, there's a whole wig. Oh, there she is. Oh, but God, when you're... Oh, my God, Sonia.
Yeah.
Oh, Sonia Armstrong. They really did her dirty. She's supposed to be like a really nice, wonderful woman, and you're supposed to really feel bad for her. But, like, first of all, look at her character bio. It says she's 32 years old.
Nah, she's a
Would
solid
you
56.
ever in your life have been like, yes, that character is a 32-year-old American woman in good health?
I would not have picked that.
She's horrifying. All right, you can minimize that. So most of the primary characters, like Poirot, for example, and one of the new side characters that we'll talk about later, their character models are really good and they look fine, but still their animations are kind of all over the place.
Oh, okay.
The facial animations are really stilted. The body animations are really stilted. The mouth syncing is also kind of just all over the place. With Poirot, it's not as noticeable because of the mustache. But with other characters, it's like, what's going on there? Well, what are you doing?
So this one's the gameplay of it. In my head, because I'm kind of imagining it as like a newer version of a point and click adventure, or maybe even something kind of how Paradise Killer was, or even how Supergiant does with their games like Hades and everything, where it's like character pop-ups and then like text and everything, but
Like
it's
a
not
mix
that.
of visual novel and sort of working around in the case of a lot of the Supergiant games, an isometric view.
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
It is not like that. And we will get, because that's one of the problems that I have with the game. So we will get to that. So the character models are a little all over the place, which also leads to, they are 3D models, and the game takes place in a fully 3D environment. Now, with the character models, that is only really a problem when you get a zoomed out enough view to see them moving and interacting with the environment. If they're just standing around talking to each other, things are mostly fine. But as soon as you zoom out enough to see a character walk away on their own, they're slipping and sliding all around. It's like, well, your feet are not making contact with the ground, my friend. Where are you going? The first couple of times I saw it, I was like, what the fuck is happening?
My game is glitching.
I was like, it wasn't. They're just like that. So anytime you get a shot that involves feet and leg movement in the picture, you know you're in for a hilarious time, because you're just going to be like, where are you going?
It's all over the place.
Slipping all over the place. So that's a couple of the mechanical issues that I've had with the game. On PS5, it mostly runs just fine, except for every now and then when you're moving around, specifically in the train. I only noticed it in the train. There will be times where Poirot just kind of freezes for a hot second. Like, the game doesn't freeze, but like Poirot just sort of can't move for a hot second. And then you kind of jimmy him around, and then he keeps going. Now, I don't know
like
if that
it's
was
a load wall or something like that.
No, because there are loading screens. This wasn't one of them. Like, you'll just be in the train, and he'll just kind of freeze for a second, and then you just have to kind of get him going again. And I was
slap
like,
him around a
okay,
bit.
yeah, just slapping around a little bit. So that was a little bit weird. I couldn't figure out if that one was me or my PS5 or the game. My PS5 is really new.
Yeah, I
so
doubt
I
it's your
kind of don't
PS5.
think it was a me problem. I think it was a game problem.
Yeah.
So the character models are a little odd. There were a couple of little mechanical issues here and there, but nothing major. However, circling back to the topic of the 3D environment, I very strongly believe that this should not have been a 3D game, specifically because of the nature of the Orient Express itself. It is a train. Trains are
long rectangular boxes.
Long rectangular boxes.
Narrow boxes, usually.
Long narrow boxes. That is exactly what I wanted you to say, and we did not talk about this in advance. So it's not a.
We don't plan our bits.
We don't plan. This shit just happens. Do you think we have time to plan this stuff? No. I came here right after beating the game. I
asked her 5 minutes before she got here what she even wanted to talk about.
I was like, yeah, I don't know. Give me a second. I got to finish the game. So so it's a very narrow space, and you are in a third-person view. So your view is right over Poirot's shoulder, usually the right shoulder, as it is in most games, which on the Orient Express is a fucking problem. Those hallways are narrow as shit. The compartments, the cabins inside, are narrow as fuck, and you are supposed to be looking up, down, and all around to investigate crime scenes and find evidence, and more importantly, golden mustaches.
So I'm assuming the camera is just going everywhere.
So the camera motions are fine enough. It's not really the camera per se that's the problem. It's the extreme claustrophobia. It's like you just never feel like you can quite get a good angle on things. And a lot of the times you're having to get so close to, like, Poirot will walk up to a small object in a room that you need to investigate. You know you need to investigate that item because there's a little white dot over it. And if you get closer, it expands into a little circle indicating that you can interact with that item. But that circle only happens if you have pointed the camera in such a way towards the item that makes it interactable. Oof. And with those really claustrophobic camera angles, it was just so frustrating so much of the time. I was like, this is infuriating.
Oof, I can imagine.
I do not enjoy this. I hate this. That being said, there were sections of the game that did not take place on the train. And it wasn't a problem.
Okay.
It was quite literally the problem of the space that they were working with in a third-person view was just way too cramped.
Because even first person would have been better.
Even first person would have been better. That's exactly what I'm trying to get to. On the train, I think that if you had been in a first-person viewpoint, it would have made the entire experience significantly better. Because first of all, at least as far as an investigative game goes, I feel like first person really gets you into the feeling of like, I'm the detective here. Yeah. And Poirot still could have had all of his voice lines. He still could have had all of his little intricacies that make his character so fun and give him all of his personality.
Could have had two little curls of a mustache appearing in the bottom of your screen.
You would periodically see his hands come up to his face to twirl his mustache. That would have been incredible.
Yeah, it would have been great.
But no, the third person perspective of it all really, I think, hurt the game, specifically on the train itself, which is the majority of the game. Really just the tutorial, the boarding of the platform, and then a couple of sections that we'll talk about later that have more to do with the story take place outside of the train. Most of it is on the train. When you're talking to characters, it's never a problem, but when you're actually trying to move around that environment and get a grip on things and figure out where everything is that you need to interact with, very frustrating experience. Did not enjoy it. But let's briefly shift to a pro about the train.
Okay.
So pretty. Such a fun, pretty train. So even though the character models are questionable at best, the built environment and the environments in general were really nice. Like the train looks sleek, shiny, expensive, because this is supposed to be like a top of the line train. Royalty would have ridden on this thing back in its heyday. You've got a countess on board, a Russian princess on board. The cream of the crop come to the cream of the crop come to the Orient Express for a luxurious experience, and the train does feel and look very luxurious. Something that I really like as well about the train is because of the luxurious environment, it has a really nice ambient, chill jazz soundtrack kind of playing the whole time. And I'm like, yeah, this soundtrack is great. I love this. Yeah, I mean, it's nothing like bombastic. Sure. You're just supposed to be chilling on a train. It's like the best example of elevator music you can think of. So I was really grooving along to the soundtrack in a lot of the sections of the train. For the rest of the game that wasn't on the train, I could not tell you one way or another what the soundtrack was like because I was not listening. But the train parts were awesome. And now I feel like I have lost my place in my notes, so I need to circle back. Oh, speaking of another pro of the game, so even though the character models, again, deeply questionable, the voice acting was, for the most part, really good.
Good.
Poirot's voice actor did a fantastic job. One of the other main characters, really the deuteragonist, the co-protagonist, her voice actress did an excellent job. All of the characters are meant to be of different nationalities. Some of them turned out a little bit better than others. I'm not going to lie, there's a character on the train that hails from Japan, and some of his voice acting, I was like, is this racism? I can't decide if I think, like, is this a really racist accent? Yeah, it was maybe too much, but also maybe they just got a Japanese actor to voice that character and his English just sounds like that, so cannot confirm one way or another. But there was more than just him where I was like, I don't know about this. But those were mostly side characters. They were not the central plot. They were not the central people in the plot of the game. So it wasn't a big deal. Most of the main characters sounded great. And then the train itself was written. So finding okay. Most of these others are cons.
It's a very big list of cons I'm seeing here.
So let's instead talk about sort of how the game functions from the investigation standpoint.
Okay.
So we've talked about being able to find clues in the environment, but that's only one part of it because Poirot's whole character deal, and he will not let you forget about it because it is a constant voice line you have to hear, is Poirot will frequently go on about his little gray cells in his brain. Like, oh yeah, my little gray cells never let me down. Basically just saying that the solving of the crime really doesn't happen externally, it's all internal. You know, you're just taking in the clues, you're taking in the testimony that you're getting from the witnesses or the suspects, and then you have to put all of those together in your mind map. And the game actually does call it Poirot's mind map, which I really appreciated. I think, what did they used to call it in Sherlock Holmes? Like his mind palace or something like that? Something stupid.
That sounds familiar. I'm not 100% sure.
Anyways, with Poirot, it's a little bit more, it's less egregious. It's just a mind map, which I appreciated. So when you actually go into his mind map, it is the UI. It's the central UI of the game that you use to sort of sort through the clues, figure out what you need to do next, and categorize whether or not you think something is one way or another. So for example, let's say that you are talking to, what's a good example that won't give away crucial pieces of the plot?
If you're worried about spoiling it for me,
no,
don't.
We're going to talk about it at the end because we have to.
Okay.
Because it's one of my primary complaints about the game.
Okay.
So we're going to have to talk about it eventually, but I don't want to talk about it quite yet. Let's say that you are the ticket. Okay, so the ticket. If you're at the hotel and you're trying to help Captain Arbuthnot find his lost train ticket, you might, for example, go into his hotel room and you note that, well, one of the windows is open. There's a breeze coming in. The wind could have blown away the ticket. You might also note that there's a water spot on the floor where someone maybe used the shower and then came out and stood on the carpeting because it's still a little bit damp. You notice that there's an empty perfume bottle in the bathroom, but it feels like Captain Arbuthnot probably doesn't use that perfume. And is that a stray earring on the nightstand of his room?
Does he have a pierced ear?
He does not.
Oh, I don't
Not
think it's
even
his
one.
then.
It probably wasn't his.
It means somebody else was probably in that room.
Probably someone else in that room. So you're obviously getting to that conclusion by finding all of these little clues, and then you have to go talk to Captain Arbuthnot about that, because obviously the ticket isn't in the room, so you have to deduce where it is. So you go to the captain and you're like, listen, bro, I may have noted some things in your room. And then when you go to the mind map to actually put two and two together, it will give you like little tiles on screen of, okay, we need you to recreate a sequence of events. So it'll be like maybe 5, 6, I think in some of the longer sequences, like 7 or 8 tiles that you have to drag and drop into place to create a timeline. And then if you get that timeline right, you'll then go to the character that you're talking to, and Poirot will actually say that series of events out loud to essentially make his case or to confront an inconsistency in another character's story and prove that they're lying, thereby getting new information out of them. So those parts of the game are really good, where you actually go into the mind map and you're looking through the clues from a very visual standpoint and then putting them together of like, okay, I know this thing and this thing, but I'm trying to get to a final conclusion. You might have 6 clues that aren't related to a timeline. You just need to sort of put conclusions together. Like, all right, well, I know that there's no footprints outside the train in the snow, and also the window is open on the train. Well, if there's no footprints in the snow, but the window is open, what's the conclusion there? The window was opened as a red herring. So there's no footprints out in the snow. So if someone opened the window to make it look like they escaped the train on foot, well, there ain't no footprints out there,
they're
bitch.
still on that train.
So that's the kind of thing that you would put two and two together of, okay, well, these two bits of evidence prove that there's an inconsistency you see here, or it will actually ask you the question of identify the 3 red herrings as part of this testimony.
Got it.
And you have to put those clues together in the mind map and then go back to the characters to talk about them. All of that stuff was really fun and good. There's also a section later that I'll talk about that was one of my favorites in the game, but we're not going to get to it right now. And then talking to the characters about their testimony is a big portion of the game.
Sure.
Which we haven't even talked about the murder. Oh my God, I realized I've given you no context.
Well, I mean, I assumed there was a murder that you're trying to solve.
We need to backtrack. I got way ahead of myself. So you are Hercule Poirot. You've just solved the mystery of the train ticket, the missing train ticket in the hotel room, right? So now you and all of your friends, well, not your friends, now you...
my power is my friends.
My power is my friends. No, now you and your friend Book, who is the train's director, can get on the train so that Poirot can get back to Paris to solve another crime. So Poirot's presence on the train is very last minute because he's received word from, the police in Paris that they desperately need him to come solve this other crime.
Right.
So somebody else hasn't shown up for the train because it's this very exclusive anniversary event. So there's only so many people that can even be on the train in the first place. And Book is like, oh my God, there's no room on the train. But somebody didn't show up. So you can take that guy's berth and B-E-R-F,
right.
B-E-R-T-H, tonight you'll have to have a roommate, but then the next night that other guy gets off and then I can move you into a room all by yourself. So obviously Poirot is like, that's excellent. I will definitely do that. Now, if you were desperately needed in Paris in 2019, I can't understand why you wouldn't take a 2-hour flight from Istanbul to Paris, but we are suspending some disbelief for the purposes of this argument.
All flights were grounded.
Yeah, I guess so.
For this anniversary event of the train.
For the anniversary event of the train. They didn't want anybody to have other options. They really wanted the train to be able to shine. So Poirot gets on the train, and as you're on the platform boarding the train, you meet some of the characters that are going to be on there with you. For example, you see a very closed-off couple that are very well-dressed. That is the Count and Countess Andreni. One of them is a politician, and then the Countess herself is just sort of a very high society type of woman. There's 2 other people who you can't identify quite yet further down the train, and they seem like they're having a very heated conversation. And oh, wait a second. Is that Captain Arbuthnot? And a woman with an earring that looks an awful lot like the one from the hotel room? Scandal. And they seem like they're really arguing about something. And then further down, you see this dude with, oh God, his face is awful. He just seems like a villain. And he's really just laying into his poor secretary, who has a very stereotypical, American accent. So this guy's really laying into his poor secretary, and you're like, oh God, that guy is so mean. But then what's that behind them further on the platform? Some mystery woman is blatantly spying on them. To them, they may not have noticed her, but to Poirot, he sees all. So you see that, okay, there are some people being spied on. There are some people having arguments. The politics are starting to come into play.
Sure.
The chess pieces are being placed upon the board, you might say.
He's putting markers on his mind map.
Putting little markers on the mind map.
Yeah.
And then you, of course, actually board the train, and the game truly begins. So pretty much all of that section was the tutorial. Then you're on the train, and the stuff actually starts up. So that thank God, so in the context of the story, the book, there's a lot of very specifically placed events that happen over the course of days on the train. But they skip the entire first day in the game, which is, thank God, because nothing happens that day. You are waiting for that night when a dude gets murdered.
Oh, shit.
The murder on the Orient Express.
The one referenced in the title.
And I really liked the way that they did this, because they give you Poirot's viewpoint. So he's in his single room now. He no longer has a roommate because, like I said, they moved some guy. So he's in his room, and his phone kind of keeps going off in the middle of the night, or he keeps getting woken up by stuff. So at about 12:30-ish, some sort of commotion happens, and it wakes up Poirot, and he kind of gets up, and he kind of looks out of his cabin. Seems like it's probably nothing. Okay, so he goes back to bed. Then around 1:15, something else happens.
Uh-oh.
And there's another bigger noise, and you're like, oh my God, there's quite a commotion. So Poirot gets back up, and again, he's looking out of his cabin, like in a brief example of first-person perspective, which was really fun. So you can actually see, like, from his perspective, him leaning around his corner to look at what's going on down the corridor of the train. And you see the train conductor, Monsieur Michel, sort of coming to a couple of different cabins to check on various people because it seems like he's been called. For some reason, one of the passengers needed him for something. And then way later in the night, you see some person like wearing a very recognizable red silk kimono running down the cabin and going elsewhere. And Poirot's just like, okay, well, that was fucking weird.
It's middle of the night.
Well, middle of the night, why aren't these people fucking slaving on this train?
He's regretting this trip instantly.
Instantly. Even more so because something else that happens in the middle of the night that people don't really, they say they don't really realize until the next day. There has been an avalanche because the train has gotten into the mountains. So there's been an avalanche up in the snowy part of the mountains blocking off the tunnel that the train needs to get through. So about 12:30, 1 a.m., the train has actually come to a complete dead stop. And that is plot important. Ooh. So the train is stopped. Poirot keeps seeing all this weird stuff happening outside his cabin. He keeps hearing all these noises, and he's like, whatever. I'm just going to go back to bed. I'm going to mind my own Poirot business for once in my life. I'm just going to go back to bed. Dun, dun, dun.
Murder.
The next morning. The next morning, I think you go to like have breakfast in the regular cabin or something. And at some point throughout your very normal breakfast, McQueen, he's the very American-sounding secretary of the mean-faced dude. Oh, wait, I'm forgetting some other plot important stuff. Okay. The night before that, before all the weird stuff happened, at dinner on the train, an important conversation happened between Poirot and the dude with the mean-looking face. Like the dude that just looks like, that man's a born villain. Born bad, been bad, gonna die bad. And boy, does he. Oh. Because that man, yeah, he does. So that man is Ratchet. So Ratchettt. So Ratchet or Ratchet. He actually comes over to Poirot's table after dinner and he sits down and he's like, Monsieur Poirot, your reputation precedes you. I understand you're a very famous detective. And Poirot is like, yeah, bitch, I'm the best. Poirot has a lot of confidence. Yeah. A lot of some people might even say ego, but he always says that he can really back it up. So Ratchet is sort of like talking, and you get the sense that Ratchet is being threatened by someone. So he tells you outright, like, I've received these threatening letters. I'm feeling not very safe on the train. I want to hire you, Poirot, to be my guard, to sort of watch over me and make sure that nobody gets me while we're on the train. And this is both true in the actual story, and they brought it over to the game, which I thought was fantastic. Poirot tells this man to his face, no, I will not accept your money. No amount of money you can pay me will be enough for me to take this job. And Ratchet is like, why? And with no holds barred, Poirot is like, I don't like your face. He says those words exactly.
I don't care if you get murdered.
And he does say them mean. Like, it is meant to come across as like a vicious comment. You're like, oh my God, Poirot.
It's 2019. That's not allowed anymore.
Yeah. I don't know what they were letting fly in the 20s or 30s or whatever it was, but vicious. It's vicious.
Your face is ugly. I hope you die.
That's literally basically what he said. So Poirot does not care that this man believes he is in mortal danger. He's like, no, I think whatever happens to you is going to happen to you.
It's in God's hands now.
And goodness knows he does in fact get murdered. So it turns out that those fears that he had were very justified. So the next morning...
Doesn't Poirot feel like an ass now?
He does not. He's like, bah.
Looks like I have another mystery to solve. It just seems to happen to follow me everywhere.
That is totally how it happens. Like, there's no point in either the story or in the game where Poirot is like, man, maybe I should have guarded him. He never even considers it. No, he never even takes it under consideration that, like, maybe I should have helped that dude because he didn't like his face, and that was good enough justification to not help him. So the next morning dawns. McQueen notices that he hasn't seen Ratchet that day yet, and he's his secretary, so he would know. So blah blah blah, you go to check on Ratchet. He's dead, obviously.
Knife to the face.
Yeah, well, not to the face, but to everywhere else. In fact, you find that he has sustained no fewer than 12 stab wounds to the body. He
Death
was
by 12 cuts.
stabbed to death in his bed. And you're like, oh, okay, well, there's a gun under his pillow. Why didn't he try to defend himself? Was he incapacitated in some way? So one of those first crucial parts of the game is you investigating the crime scene and Richette's death. You obviously examine his body. You find a very conspicuously placed, this was one of the modern things that I just couldn't stop laughing about. It was so stupid. You find a little vial of banana-flavored vape liquid. And I was like, really? Vapes?
Somebody just hitting up their
That's
jewel.
what it's come to. So you find vape liquid at the scene of the crime. There are 12 stab wounds on the body. There's no murder weapon. You don't know where the murder weapon is yet. You obviously know that it was a knife of some kind, but you're not sure what. You also find that there's a drink on the side of Ratchet's bed that has a white residue in the bottom. Sleeping pills, perhaps?
Could be.
They actually use the term barbiturates, which I was like, if you're under the age of 40, I feel like you're not going to know what a barbiturate is.
Yeah.
But it's the phrase for any type of sort of medicinal element that helps you sleep. So barbiturates were in his glass, so you're like, oh, okay, that's how he was incapacitated. But who had the time to incapacitate him? Who had access? Surely did Ratchet take them himself? Did he choose to take a sleeping pill to help him sleep because maybe he was just nervous about being murdered? And then that fear turned out coming true.
Yeah.
So you keep investigating his cabin, and you do also find the threatening letters he was talking about. So eventually you get into a safe that he had in the room, and you find some threatening letters, a bunch of cash, like a lot of just cold hard cash, and an agenda that Ratchet had. And he was supposed to be meeting someone in Venice, and it's all sort of in like code that you have to crack and figure out what's going on there. So Ratchet clearly had some shady ass business going on. So Ratchet's clearly not a great dude, but also he is dead, and everybody's on a train trapped in the mountains. Again, they are totally snowed in. There's nowhere that they can go. So the other like 15-ish people on the train are like, well, fuck, dude, we don't want to get murdered either. You gotta solve this. So the police obviously can't get to them to help with the crime either. So Poirot is like, aha, no worries, my friends, I will do it. So that's why he's investigating the murder in the first place. Everybody is trapped. It's sort of one of those closed room mysteries, but the closed room is the entire train. So that's the premise of the murder on the Orient Express. Do you have any questions?
No, I think I'm pretty good.
Okay.
That ugly dude's dead.
That ugly
Poirot
dude's
celebrates
dead.
because that
Poirot
dude's
is
dead, and he gets a new,
celebrating.
and he has a job. I'm
And
up to speed.
So there's all kinds of people on the train, and all of that weird shit happened in the night around 12:30, and then again at 1:15, and then maybe there was another noise at around like 4 or 5 a.m. when that silk kimonoed figure ran down a hallway. So you've already got some leads that you need to start following up on. So then the mystery really kicks in. So this is all probably, if you were playing quickly, this could be within the first 30 minutes to hour of your playtime in the game.
Okay.
Speaking of the entire game, I think I finished it right at about 8 hours. Like 7 to 8.
So not a super big game.
I think some people that sort of completionists, people that were looking for all of the mustaches, for example, I think some people reported that like the max amount of time for the game is about 10 hours.
Oh, okay.
So you can beat it anywhere comfortably between roughly 7-ish to 10 hours. A nice, short, investigative experience. Longer than the average Nancy Drew game, but still pretty short. A nice, reasonable, short experience. And boy, do they pack a lot of stuff into that amount of time. So you obviously have to go down to the other passengers on the train and really start interrogating people, start checking for alibis. And then, of course, there's a doctor on the train, thank God, Dr. Constantine, who is the one character that I cannot remember if he was in the book or not.
Okay.
I feel like he wasn't. I don't think there was a doctor
A new
on
edition
board.
from the 2019
Yeah, I
version.
think this guy was a new edition. Cannot fully confirm that. It's been quite a while since I read Murder on the Orient Express, but this dude, I didn't remember his name and I didn't remember his function at all, so I was like, I don't think you were here previously. It's also not really important. You just need a doctor to confirm that, hey, there are 12 stab wounds on this guy's body. They range from about 2 centimeters deep to as much as 10 centimeters deep.
That's a deep one.
Which is important because he also gives you a file of, hey, I couldn't help but notice, based on the trajectory of the wounds and the different depths, there's a very high likelihood that there was actually more than one stabber.
Oh.
Because some of these are coming from a left-handed perspective, and others are all coming from the right, and based on the different depths, it seems like somebody stronger may have inflicted some of them, and somebody left-handed and weaker may have done some of these more shallow ones.
Interesting.
Very interesting stuff right off the bat. So you've got all kinds of leads that you need to start following up on, and that whole process for Poirot is really the process of interrogating other passengers, getting alibis, finding inconsistencies in alibis in the mind map, and then going back and continuing to grill people. Rinse and repeat, that is the gist of the entire game.
Okay.
It is at this point that I think we cannot possibly proceed without talking about both in-game and story spoilers for the actual story Murder on the Orient Express.
Okay.
So from this point forward, there's definitely going to be spoilers for both.
Take off your headphones.
So if you're interested in playing the game yourself, you know what, actually real quick, before we go to the spoiler section, the TLDR is I think I would have had a significantly better experience with this game if I had never seen the movies or read the books.
Okay. Which, I mean,
yes,
kind of makes sense.
That is the gist. I think that the person that is best for this game has never seen Murder on the Orient Express.
So me.
Has no idea. So you, yes.
But I'm not going to play it now.
Because if you know what's happening, there's enough that is dead on to the story that you're like, okay, well, they're clearly not crafting an entirely new tale. There are some new elements that go along with the modernity of it, but there's enough that's still story accurate, like all of the clues, all of the timing, the settings, why is Poirot there?
Yeah.
All of that really lines up with the original source material, so you're like, okay, well, where are they going with this then? So what I mean to say is, if you're going to play this game, don't watch the movie. Don't read the book. Don't do that beforehand. Play the game, because the less you know about where it's going, the more enjoyment I think you're going to have.
Okay.
My already knowing how it was supposed to end, I think actually really damaged my ability to enjoy the game. So now we will go into spoiler territory.
Spoilers.
You don't know how Murder on the Orient
No
Express
idea.
ends. Okay. God, where to fucking start? There's actually a lot to talk about here.
Okay.
Because the story basically, over the course of your interrogations with the other passengers, Poirot starts to realize that some of these people seem to know each other. So you're starting to get ideas already that certain passengers on the train may have more in common with each other than they initially let on.
Yeah.
Like the couple that you saw fighting out on the platform that probably definitely slept together at the hotel, they're pretending to have never met before. So they're not owning up to the fact that they know each other. You don't know, maybe it was just a one-night stand. Sure, that could be the case, but they're pretending to be perfect strangers. Just two British people that happen to be on the same train. Nothing to see here. Move along. But that's just one of the things. Then you find one of the brand new elements of the game that is not in any of the previous stories, and that is an entirely new character.
Oh, okay.
So you find this other character, this completely new character, based on a problem that some of the other passengers report of they can't get into the restroom on one of the cars. And you're like, okay, well, maybe the murderer's fucking in there.
Yeah.
So you go and you bust down the door to the bathroom and find an unconscious woman that is not supposed to be on the train. So there's just this lady laying on the floor, very passed out. You're trying to figure out, okay, is she asleep? Is she injured? She's not dead.
Yeah.
But like something more is going on than her just being sound asleep. So Poirot and the conductor and the other people of authority on the train wrestle her out of the bathroom and take her to one of the empty cabins. And you realize over the course of the doctor examining her and looking at her eyes, they're very dilated. She's really groggy. She can't quite seem to fully wake up. She's been drugged. Okay, so who's this person? Why is she on the train? Why has she been drugged? She eventually comes back around and Poirot is able to interrogate her, and she reveals herself as Joanna Locke. She's the other character on the cover of the game that is right behind Poirot, that is like in a prominent position.
Okay, yep.
So it was clear from the start that there was going to be someone that didn't really match with the rest of the story, and this is who that is. It's Joanna Locke. You find out that she's American and that she herself is a detective.
Oh.
So she's a
How
detective
fortuitous.
too. Yeah, what a coincidence, right? Two of us on this train and neither of us were supposed to be here. So that's already like, oh, okay. So somebody clearly wanted her out of the way sometime last night for some reason.
Yeah.
So you're interrogating her and you're learning more about her backstory. And this is one of the coolest functions of the game that I really wish they had really ran further with. Joanna gets her own sections. So Joanna fills in a lot of the blanks, and I actually really like how they did this in the game, because in the story, it's all just kind of told to you through flashback.
Sure.
Like, oh, okay, some stuff happened about 4 years ago that you need to know about. And all of that comes to light through the course of Poirot's investigation. But in the game, it comes to you through Joanna. So Joanna is like, oh, well, I'm here for a specific reason. Let me tell you my story. And then you get transported back in time as Joanna.
Interesting. Okay.
So it flashes back, but you actually get to be her. You get to pilot her around and go investigate these totally new territories. Because Joanna, again, maybe 4 years ago, I think the game says, so back in about 2015, she was brought on to help investigate a kidnapping. Dun, dun, dun.
Lots of crimes in this game.
Lots of crimes in this game. So many crimes. Poirot knows no life without crimes. So she's investigating what is the real situation in the story as well, which is the kidnapping of Daisy Armstrong. So do you remember ever hearing about that really famous celebrity kidnapping? This was real life.
Okay.
That happened in like the 1920s.
Yeah, well,
There was like
Charles Lindbergh's
Yes,
daughter?
the
Yeah.
Lindbergh baby. That's exactly right. So this whole story was very clearly inspired by the Lindbergh baby kidnapping.
Okay.
So it's supposed to be an echo of all of that. But at the time that Agatha Christie was writing it, it still would have been very fresh on the public's minds.
Right.
So it totally makes sense. But that's still the case here. And that was sort of one of the things that I was curious to see. Are they going to change that? You know, are they going to try to make it like a different crime or a more recent crime? Maybe all of these people got cheated out of cryptocurrency money when Binance went under. You know, who knows? But no, they keep it exactly the same. So Joanna is helping investigate the kidnapping of Daisy Armstrong. At the point that she is brought in, she's really just coming to the Armstrong mansion to help fill in a couple of gaps that they have in one of the testimonies. So the nanny of the family, Suzanne Moreau, for whatever reason, the statement that she originally gave to police got corrupted, you know, data files, something got deleted, blah, blah, blah. The point is, she has to come back to the house to fill in Suzanne's statement. Nothing really to see here, just a very routine visit. But in the process, you get to talk to the father, Mr. Armstrong, the mother, Sonia Armstrong, who we recently looked at, and we saw how fucked up the kidnapping really fucked her up. So we meet Sonia, we meet the father, we meet the nanny, Suzanne Moreau, and those are really the only characters that you meet. Of course, you know of Daisy because you see photos of her all over the house. There's like a little shrine set up to her, you know, with flowers that people have sent praying for her return, blah, blah, blah. So you're interviewing Suzanne, you're getting to know the family a little bit, and then you leave. And then you sort of come back to the family mansion a couple of days later to keep following up on a couple of other leads because Joanna's getting way more invested than she's supposed to be.
Okay.
She's technically not really the lead detective on the case, but she's just through her conversation with the family and through inconsistencies that she's been finding in Suzanne, the nanny's story, and some of the other information that they have on file. Joanna's already like, ooh, I think more is happening here than people are really kind of letting on. And through one thing leads to another, you discover that for, whatever, I forget who actually gives you the tip. Maybe it's Suzanne. Oh, yeah, it is. Okay, so the nanny reveals that she has been lightly hiding some information. She didn't commit the crime, she claims, but she did leave out of her original statement that on the night of the kidnapping, when she left Daisy alone in her room, because it was like 10 p.m., you know, you don't stay with a kid all night, even when you're the nanny. When she left Daisy's room to go talk to her mother on the phone for 30 minutes, her mother's in a coma. She wasn't talking to her mom, she was talking to her boyfriend. Ooh. And ever since the night of the kidnapping, she has not heard a single peep out of her boyfriend.
Seems like we have a culprit.
Seems like there might be something going on. So Suzanne is like, no, you don't know Noah. He would never kidnap a kid. And you're like, bitch, why did you leave this out of your statement? So you get some more clues out of Susanna, and you're able to triangulate on a map. Okay, well, there's this cabin out in the woods that might be a likely spot to hide a kidnapped child.
Sure.
So then again, as Joanna, you get to get in your cop car. You don't get to drive. It just sort of cuts you to the scene. But you get to go investigate another crime scene.
So like a welcome break from being on the train.
A welcome break from the train. You get to go to a cabin out in the middle of the woods. It's creepy. It's run down. That like it's locked from the it's locked from the inside, so you can't get in. You have to solve some puzzles to get inside in the first place. And then you find that like, hey, it seems like a couch is maybe sort of hiding an underground a trapdoor under here. So you move a couch, you open up a trapdoor, there's a bomb inside.
Oh, shit.
So Nancy Drew. At this point in the game, I was like, oh, this would definitely happen to Nancy. So you have to solve this little bomb defusal puzzle, which, by the way, I intentionally sat there for a long ass time because I was like, in a Nancy Drew game, if you fuck around too long and you get it wrong, you do die.
Oh,
There's
shit.
an explosion, Nancy dies, and the game comes up with a you died. It's very Dark Souls.
Oh, damn.
Nancy predated Dark Souls by a lot. I just want everybody to know that.
They stole it from her.
They stole it from her. They don't know what they're doing. So you can die in Nancy Drew games is what I'm saying, and things are time sensitive when the game tells you they are.
Yeah.
Nancy once died in a sauna because somebody locked her in there and then jacked up the heat hot enough that she died of it. Very tragic.
Wow.
If you weren't
Jesus.
if you weren't able to get out in time. So what I'm saying is the stakes are very real in Nancy Drew games. There are no fucking stakes in this game. And that's a con pretty much throughout, because both in the case of this specific puzzle of Joanna's like, oh my God, the timer's counting down. I got to defuse this bomb right away or I'm going to die. No, you can just sit there.
And just
you
let
can,
it
you
run
can just
down.
sit there and let it. I mean, there's no actual timer on screen. It's just beeping. So she just kind of tells you like, oh my God, it's probably going to go off any second now. And you're like, okay,
Let's see.
let's find out. So I sat there for a long time, just waiting to see what would happen. Nothing happened. So there was no stakes in that specific instance. And then this very conveniently leads me back around to one of my other complaints, is that there are no stakes throughout any of your investigation. When you're interrogating people, for example, Poirot has a certain list of choices that he can make to talk to them about. And sometimes it will give you two options. Like, okay, you're trying to convince this person to give you access to their spouse, for example, so you can keep up the interrogation. Which of these choices is more likely to get him to let me into their room? Do I want to go for, hey, I know that you really love your wife? Or do I want to go at it from the perspective of, you're a protector, you're really protective of your wife? It does not matter.
Same question,
You can get
same result?
No, not the same result. You can just get it wrong and there are no consequences.
Oh.
Like, you can do the wrong thing and then come back and immediately re-choose the right answer, and there's no consequence for that.
Interesting. So it kind of then, you may have different like variations in like you can get it wrong, quote unquote, but there's no plan. So if you're familiar with the story, then you're going to know this is always going to lead to the same predetermined conclusion.
That is exactly the problem. Things are on a very predestined path, which again, I wasn't sure that was the case when I started the game.
Yeah.
I got very sure of it about halfway through, really even a little bit sooner than that. I was just waiting to see what new stuff they might throw in. Actually, when you start, this was pretty cheeky and funny. I thought this was hilarious. When you start the section as Joanna's flashback, you get a trophy in game that says, "This wasn't in the book, now was it?" or it says something like, well, this part's new, isn't it? Because up until that point, everyone that knows Murder on the Orient Express would recognize every single story beat except Joanna. So I liked that they kind of poked fun at themselves in that specific instance of like, see, you thought we weren't going to do new shit, but we did. But that's just a quick aside. The point is, there are no stakes. It's not like if you do something wrong enough, you will get a game over. There's no way that you can get a game over. The only reason that you would want to do perfect interrogations, perfect mind mapping, perfect conclusions to all of the little mini crimes you're solving along the way to the big crime is that there is a trophy. There's a trophy for the game of, hey, if you beat the game and you never get a confrontation wrong or you never get a piece of evidence wrong, you get this trophy.
Okay.
So basically, if you perfect run the game, you get that trophy. But in the game itself, it has no bearing on the situation. And it did make it just, it completely disinvested me because I already knew what was happening. So it's not like I was playing the story for the mystery itself. I already knew what was going to happen. So to that end, there's nothing additional to motivate you to be really on top of shit.
Yeah.
Like, I could blank out during an entire conversation on screen just to get to the options for dialogue, and it would make no difference of how much I was listening, because I could just try all the different options until I got the right ones and then proceed with the game. So it didn't matter how much you really thought about it. It didn't matter how good your logic was or how bad your logic was, because there were no stakes.
It just mattered how well you put everything together on your mind map.
It just mattered. Yeah. Really, it is so guardrailed.
Yeah.
You cannot be wrong in this game. It does not give you the opportunity.
See, like, I understand it being being taken from a well-established book, well-established movie, and stuff like that. It is interesting that it doesn't try to deviate from that in any way and give a little bit more. Like, what if it had a way, I don't know, again, like how difficult this would be, but like a way where it like randomized the murder.
That's what I was kind of hoping would happen.
Yeah.
Because, and we will get to this later, but there could have been, they could have played it as, hey, you can get the ending wrong.
Yeah.
I was really hoping that this would be a case of they took, for example, the Paradise Killer route.
Yeah.
I don't know how well you remember my Paradise Killer review, but at the end of that game, it is up to you as the main character to decide who's guilty of the crime that you're investigating. And you can do it as, you can say, okay, yeah, you're guilty. You're not guilty. And your decisions are set in stone because you then kill the people that were guilty.
Oh, damn. Okay.
But there's nothing like that in this game. So there's no way that you can get a different result. The result is going to be what happens. There's no deviating from that. And I feel like if they had taken more creative liberties than what they did, it could have been really interesting. Because then you could have had the case of, well, okay, you have 12 optional endings of who you accused of being the murderer, and then maybe one of them is considered the true ending. If you got all the clues, if you did all the confrontations right, if there were actually stakes, it could have been a really gripping game.
Yeah.
But because there were no stakes, because you could not possibly be wrong as Poirot, and because the game had a very specific ending that it was driving towards, there was just no freedom of being able to do things differently, and that really hurt the game.
I can understand that. For sure.
Now, if you didn't know what the fuck was happening, you would have been like, oh my God, at the very end, your mind would have been blown. But if you already knew it was happening, like a lot of people will, you're like, what? Why are we here?
Because there's a good chance if you're interested in a game like this, you probably have already been very highly versed in the Nancy Drews, the Nancy Drew books, the Agatha Christie books. So it's like, so that's what I mean. Yeah, it definitely like would steal all of the fun out of it.
It did really suck all of the fun out of it, except for the Joanna parts. Because the Joanna parts, again, even though there were still no stakes, it was all new.
Right.
So it was like, oh my God, look at all this fun new stuff we get to do. So circling back to the bomb. So we're back in the cabin. She's diffusing the bomb. So the bomb is connected to these tanks of like super gasoline or whatever you want to call it. And they're surrounding a box. So when you defuse the bomb, you're like, oh, okay, well, what were they guarding? What was this huge bomb supposed to cover up? It doesn't show it on screen, of course. They do it very sensitively, but you see Joanna's face as she opens the box they were surrounding and discovers Daisy Armstrong's body.
Oh.
So this kid's like 3 or 4, but in the context of the game, so it's a little kid.
Yeah.
So she finds Daisy dead. The kidnapping is now a murder. So we know that, like, okay, some stuff happened 4 years ago that has brought Joanna to the train. So in Joanna's investigation, you continue going through her paces. You keep kind of coming back to her, like at different points in the game. You keep coming back to her and learning more and more. And eventually you run into this guy at the cabin, like post-crime scene. Like CSI has already been there. They've marked all the different stuff. They've taken away all the evidence. But you get a call on the radio of like, hey, some guy blew through our police barricade at the cabin. Is anybody in the area that can go check on him? And Joanna's the closest one. She's like, oh, yeah, I'll go up there. So she goes back to the cabin to encounter this guy who claims he's a journalist. And he's an investigative journalist. He wants to help. But you, of course, arrest him because he tampered with a crime scene.
Right.
And also, in the bed of his truck, there's a missing gas can. And also, he says that he found something that the investigators missed. It's the door to a bunker in the backyard that the investigators did miss. So that was true. But you're like, How'd he know there was
Yeah,
bunker
how'd
there?
he know that?
How'd
He was
you
quick.
know this?
That was
To
quick.
be fair, in the game, it is just kind of like right fucking there. Really,
Somebody should have just turned around and seen
They
it.
should have really just seen it, but they don't. So you get into the locked bunker. Again, you have to do some puzzling to get in there. Very fun. And you're like, wait a second, this is the gas can from his truck. This dude was not just trying to help and be an investigative journalist. I feel like he was here to try and burn this bunker down.
Yeah.
Because you find more evidence that indicates that, like, oh, is this where they held Daisy? So it's like, okay, something more is going on here. So Joanna takes this guy, he claims his name is Clark, Martin Clark, or whatever he calls himself. So you take him back to the station. You're grilling him on the investigation. You know he's lying about shit, but Joanna can't get anything to stick. And because of XYZ reasons on the side, everyone else at the police station believes the nanny did it. So they're trying to pin the murder on the nanny because she's been framed, you're pretty sure, by this dude Clark. So Joanna's trying to prove it, but she can't. They release Clark because they can't just indefinitely hold him.
Right.
He gets away. Suzanne Moreau, the nanny, kills herself.
Oh, dear.
Everybody assumes that was like an admission, an admission of guilt. Like,
Sure.
oh, she killed Daisy, and just in a fit of guilt about it, the nanny then killed herself. Case closed. But in the process of that whole thing, Sonia Armstrong actually dies because she was pregnant and she has a miscarriage that kills her from like the stress of her other daughter being kidnapped. And then in the wake of that, you later find out that the dad also killed himself after he lost his wife, unborn child, and child.
Jesus Christ.
So the entire Armstrong family got decimated as the fallout of Daisy being kidnapped and murdered. So Joanna is like, I am not fucking letting this go. I know it wasn't the nanny. I found evidence at the scene that indicates that it was this other guy and or that the nanny was framed. I'm not letting this go. And then you get to a part that was my favorite part of the game. You, as Joanna, you get to go back to Joanna's apartment. This is years later. Like,
Yeah.
the case has already been solved. No one but Joanna is looking into it. But you finally find a piece that links that Clark guy back around to the murder. Because the actual Clark's body was just found.
Oh, shit.
And the guy in this autopsy is not the guy I met.
Oh.
So it's like, somebody stole his identity
Yep.
and killed the real Clark. So the pieces are all coming together on the literal conspiracy wall with the red string. Joanna literally has a conspiracy wall in her apartment, and you get to go through and put new things on the wall, and you get to place the red strings to all of the pieces that are starting it's all coming together. And as Joanna, you find, and I love the way that they did this in the context of the game, because it makes the actual facts of the story line up so well, because you find out, hey, wait a second. In this photo of Mr. Armstrong getting out of his car at a press event because he was a celebrity, isn't that Antonio Foscarelli, who's on the train with me? Oh, okay, so he's there, and then, hey, wait a second. The DA that originally oversaw the Armstrong kidnapping, his last name is McQueen. Is he Hector McQueen's father? Who and the DA killed himself afterwards because he knew he'd done wrong. So like, wait a second. So the driver's up there, and then my guy's dad killed himself because he did the case so bad. And then wait a second, what about over here? Then just like, it's all coming together. It's literally all coming together on the board, and it's all leading Joanna to the Orient Express because she finds out like, hey, wait a second, this Hector McQueen guy, why is he working for, what do they call him? Cassetti. So originally his name was Cassetti. That's the guy that Joanna is trying to investigate, his real name, air quotes.
Yeah.
So she's piecing everything to Cassetti and like, okay, what's going on this train? I gotta get on that train to find out. So she winds up going to Europe. She winds up buying somebody out of their train ticket. She gets on the train, basically through sort of like, not nefarious means, but definitely not legal means. Subterfuge. There we go. So she gets on the train where she's not supposed to be, gets drugged the night of the murder, wakes up the next day. Her lead for the Armstrong case is dead. So that's why she's there. So from then on, it's Poirot and Joanna kind of jointly investigating the rest of the crime on the train.
Okay.
So unfortunately, all the fun non-train times have ended.
Right.
Oh my God, there's a lot happening. So we really kind of have to get around to the ending of the actual story now, which is, are you ready to find out?
I'm ready to find out. Who did it? Who done the deed?
All 12 people on the train.
Oh, okay.
Literally everyone is the murderer. So through XYZ of you investigating the entire fallout of the Armstrong kidnapping, you realize that everyone on that train that isn't staff or the doctor or obviously Joanna and Poirot,
Right.
everyone else that was there by design, they actually purchased tickets legally. They all knew the Armstrongs or they knew the killer, Ratchet. So everybody's connected to this crime. They did, in fact, orchestrate it to make sure that Ratchet would be on that train so that they could kill him. The whole thing was a setup.
Interesting.
Yes.
What a twist.
What a twist. And when you're reading the book or when you're watching the movie, you're like, oh my God. And I imagine that if you didn't know that, this reveal would be really impactful in the game. But for me, I was like, bitch, I know. I already know. Let's keep going.
I knew this before it began.
And this is another part that just really infuriated me. So in the final scene where Poirot has collected all of the different suspects into the lounge of the train and he's interrogating them one by one, but publicly, so that because he knows they all did it.
Yeah.
They all know they did it. So
Right.
they're not playing chicken anymore. He's actually calling people out on it. And he's listing how they were involved in the crime. But the game makes it to where, okay, you go to each person one by one, Poirot talks to them and sort of states his case for why he thinks they stabbed Ratchet.
Yeah.
And then it asks you on screen, okay, did this person stab Ratchet? And so for characters like the doctor or for the train director, Book, the answer is no.
Right.
But you can get that wrong. Like I logicked it bad. Like I knew that somebody hadn't done it, but I was like, oh well, fuck, maybe, I don't know. So I did the wrong answer, and just in his mind, Poirot thinks, oh no, that's not right. And so you just go back and say, yeah.
Okay.
You just so he's accusing all these people of either having stabbed or not stabbed Ratchet. Basically, are you guilty of the crime or are you not?
Yeah.
Either by direct stabbing or because you covered for somebody with a fake alibi, for example. And it does not matter if you get those right or wrong. It has absolutely no impact.
That's a little weird.
Yeah, I hated that. That whole sequence felt so unnecessary because I was like, well, if you're not even going to give me true choices, why are you asking me to determine if they're right or wrong? So that was infuriating, but basically the game ends there, quotation marks.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that in a second, but the crime is officially over. Now, as part of the investigation, Poirot says, okay, we have two theories here. The first theory is what all of the people on the train wanted to make the crime look like, which is that when the train had stopped at one of its predetermined stops, an unknown person got on the train, stabbed Ratchet, and then got back off at the platform before the train moved on to its next location.
Okay.
And that would have been a perfectly plausible story if the train hadn't gotten trapped in an avalanche, and if, of course, Poirot and Joanna Locke literally weren't on the train. So they had a pretty plausible other explanation for who could have killed Ratchet. So both in-game and in the story, it sort of ends with Poirot going, okay, well, sure, we've got two theories. One, literally all 12 of you stabbed this dude. Or B, all right, so maybe this random person that we don't know got on at the platform, stabbed him, and then left. What do you guys want to do here?
Yeah.
The basic question is like, we all know that guy killed a little kid. He's probably killed countless other people. This dude was bad fucking news.
Right.
Is it really so bad?
If he's dead,
He got
and we
stabbed
have to
12
let people
times.
know.
So basically, the end of the crime is Poirot's just kind of going to let it slide.
Okay.
They all know what they did. They're not fucking sorry. It was kind of like a just end to this really bad dude.
Right.
Sure, it wasn't technically through the criminal justice system, but like justice was served, you know?
Yeah.
So that's how the
They
game
Dextered it.
technically ends. Now, there is a post-credits whole other like hour of gameplay.
Oh, wow.
Now, I don't know if this is normal for the developers that made the game. Like, maybe they do this with all of their Poirot games, because this isn't the first one. The developer, Midi-chlorians, Mini M something, the developer, Microids. So the developer Microids, they've made, I think this is either their third or fourth Poirot game. So this isn't their first rodeo. They've
Yeah.
done these before, so I don't know if this is common, and they always do this at the end of their games, but at the end of the game, Joanna and Poirot get off the train at Venice because they're like, wait a second, the doctor actually got it wrong. There were 13 stab wounds. This was new. So this was new. They're saying like, oh, there was actually a 13th stab wound on that body.
It's Joanna.
Right. She was like, fuck this guy. No, it wasn't Joanna, but instead you have to figure out, okay, who did it. And I think the purpose was to set up the next game.
Okay.
I think that that's what they were going for there. The terrible irony of it is that that whole sort of post-game section of the game had some of the other most fun parts of the game.
Oh.
There was a chase. You had to chase a guy through the streets of Venice after you saw him murder somebody, but it was a masked dude because it was Carnival in Venice.
Of course it is.
It was so high stakes. I was like, oh my God, shit's finally happening. And it wasn't even technically in the game.
Damn.
Which is my final complaint with the game. I feel like it could not figure out what it actually wanted to be. Did it want to be this modern retelling, or did it want to be true to the source material?
Yeah.
And I feel like it never firmly enough sat on either side of that question and actively hurt itself in the process. I feel like if they had really gone wide with it, really taken liberties, the game could have been excellent. Or if they hadn't, they should have made it a period piece.
Yeah.
It should have been set when it's supposed to be set in the 1920s or 30s. Everything could have been, very noir, very film noir. It could have been awesome. Instead, there was just sort of this weird feeling of like, wait, why are people vaping and using their cell phones? It just like
This doesn't make sense.
Tonally, it didn't make sense. And then it also just didn't make sense in the context of the game itself. Like, why? Why are we doing this? So there was really never a good. They didn't really justify it. Is what I'm trying to say. They never really justified why they were bringing the game into 2019.
Other just to be different.
Other than just to be different, and they could, if that had been the case, they should have been really different with it.
Yeah.
So overall, not the worst game in the world, but also not great.
Not the best.
If you've never done Murder on the Orient Express, you're probably going to have a great time. It's going to be super fun. But if you've played any amount of other investigative games like the Nancy Drew games, for example, I think you're going to be pretty disappointed because it's not interesting enough on the investigation side for you to really feel super invested in it.
Well, and
again,
if there's no stakes. Yeah.
There are no
Yeah.
stakes. So play Paradise Killer, play any of the Nancy Drew games. There are better investigation and murder mystery games out there. This one is okay. It's not great.
Nicely done.
Middle of the road.
It's mid, as the kids
Literally
say.
middle of the train. It's very mid. Oh boy, I'm exhausted.
Well, cool. So there you have it.
There you
If
have
you are
it.
a fan of the investigative games, maybe not a fan of Agatha Christie stuff, give this one a shot because then you'll actually,
You'll have a great
have the
time.
mystery.
Yeah, you're going to have a super good time.
But, if you are more familiar, maybe stay away. But overall, what would you say? Like, it really is just like straight up, just like mid.
A solid fucking 5 out of 10. Like so mid.
Yeah.
Like I can't really rag on it because there were things about it. The Joanna parts were the most fun.
Right.
All of the truly new parts of the game were really interesting. Everything else was so mid.
Yeah. And it's good, I guess, that they did that with Joanna parts, because especially that had to be what they were throwing in to be like, this is the new stuff for people who are familiar with this. Because, especially since they didn't have a system in it to where it does change it up, although I guess from the story, it doesn't really matter because everybody does.
No. Yeah, everybody does the crime and they all do the time. Well, they don't do any time, but you get the idea.
Then still, like, I understand then that why that it does have to stay so strict to the story. It is interesting that this is how late into video games, unless there's another one, that someone did decide to do this. Like, had this been like the mid 90s, like it's interesting because now we've had the book, you had multiple movies or various retellings of it, and now you're getting a video game version of it. You're probably not going to stumble upon this unless you're already an Agatha Christie fan.
I think that's true. And so I did actually look up, there have been other Agatha Christie video games and another version of the Murder on the Orient Express from a totally different publisher and developer. But even still, the first one that is officially listed only goes back to 2005.
Oh, okay.
So there have only been like between 10 to 20 Agatha Christie games over all of those years from different publishers and developers. The Microids one are the newest ones out of all of that history, but there's actually not that much there, which I also kind of thought was surprising. You know, think about how many Sherlock Holmes games are probably out there.
Nancy Drew
Tons
ones.
of them. Well, Nancy Drew rules.
Well, yeah, but still.
That's totally justified. Meanwhile, this Poirot shit, they really got to work on it.
You gotta tighten it up.
But also, to that point, the Nancy Drew games go so wide with the crime. They are not following the books. They're fucking making up their own shit. And
Which,
it
I mean,
works.
but that's like the thing.
It totally
Yeah.
works.
It's
It makes
like-
perfect sense.
It's like after I watched Game of Thrones, I was like, I want to read the books. Then I go to read the books, and I realize I'm just rereading the
Yeah, it's
TV
like,
show. No need for this. I
boo.
don't need to spend my time doing it.
Yeah, absolutely pass.
Interesting. Well, very cool. Very cool. Well, glad you got to play the game and everything like that. Sorry it didn't quite meet up to your expectations for it, but not all of them can be winners.
They can't all be Nancy
They can't
Drew.
all be winners. They can't all be
They
Nancy
can't
Drew.
all be Nancy.
Well, with that, everybody, I think that concludes this episode of Team Chat Podcast. Let us know, though, if you have played Agatha Christie's Murder on the Orient Express. Let us know your thoughts. You can writing us an email at teamchatpodcast@gmail.com, jumping on our Discord and talking about it with us there, or commenting wherever you're listening to or watching the show. We would love to hear from you.
And thank you, Kirok, for the game.
Yes.
Even though it was solidly mid, I still really appreciate it.
It's still, he thought to send it to you.
He
and
still
sent
thought to
the
send it
gift,
to me,
and
so
that's
thank you.
Very great. And we will be doing another episode later whenever I get around to playing Bramble, so which should be coming up soon in our slate of episodes. So be on the lookout for that. But until next time, everybody, I'm one of your hosts, Jarrett Wilson, joined to my right by Rachel Mogan.
Adios.
We will see you all next time.